The kingdom during the 5th century. King Hermeric. In 416, the Visigoths entered the Iberian Peninsula, sent by the emperor of the West to fight off the barbarians arriving in 409. By 418, the Visigoths, led by their king, Wallia, had devastated both the Scythian Vandals and the Alans, leaving Hasidic Vandals and the Suevi undisturbed by the Wallia's campaign, as the two remaining forces in the Iberian Peninsula. In 419, after the departure of the Visigoths to their new lands in Aquitaine, a conflict arose between the Vandals under Gunderic and the Suevi, led by King Hermeric. Both armies met in the Battle of Nerbasus Mountains by the intervention of Roman forces commanded by the comes Hesperium Asturus, ended the conflict by attacking the Vandals and forcing them to move to Baetica, in modern Andalusia, leaving the Suevi in virtually sole possession of the whole province. In 429, as the Vandals were preparing their departure to Africa, a Swabian warlord named Hermegarius moved to Lusitania to plunder it, but was confronted by the new Vandal king, Gasseric. Hermegarius drowned in the river Gardenia while retreating. This is the first instance of an armed Suebi action outside the provincial limits of Galicia. Then, after the Vandals left for Africa, the Swabians were the only barbarian entity left in Hispania. King Hermeric spent the remainder of his years solidifying the Suevic rule over the entire province of Galicia. In 430, he broke the old peace and maintained with the locals, sacking central Galicia, although the barely Romanized Galicia, who were reoccupying old Iron Age hill forts, managed to force a new peace, which was sealed with the interchange of the prisoners. However, new hostilities broke out in 431 and 433. In 433, King Hermeric sent a local bishop, Simplicius, as an ambassador. This being the first evidence of collaboration between the Sueves and locals. However, it was not until 438 that an enduring peace, which would last for 20 years, was reached in the province. King Reclia. In 438, Hermeric became ill. Having annexed the entirety of the former Roman province of Galicia, he made peace with the local population and retired, leaving his son Recula as the king of the Sueves. Recula saw an opportunity for expansion and began pushing the other areas of the Iberian Peninsula. In the same year, he campaigned in Baetica, defeating in open battle the Romane Militix II Adventus by the banks of Genil River, capturing a large treasure. A year later, in 439, the Sueves invaded Lusitania and entered into the capital, Merida, which briefly became the new capital of their kingdom. Reclia continued with the expansion of the kingdom, and by 440 he fruitfully besieged the forced surrender of Roman official Count Cenarus in the strategic city of Mertilla. Next year, in 441, the armies of Recula conquered Seville just months after the death of the old king Hermeric, who had ruled his people for more than 30 years. With the conquest of Seville, capital of Baetica, the Suevi managed to control Baetica and Carthaginius. It had been said, however, that the Suevi conquest of Baetica and the Carthaginians was limited to raids, and the Suevi presence of any was minute. In 446, the Romans dispatched to the provinces of Baetica and the Carthaginians and the Magister Ulster Militia. Vistus, who had assisted a large number of Goths, attempted to subdue the Suevi and restore imperial administration to Hispania. Recula marched to meet the Romans, and after defeating the Goths, Vitus fled in disgrace. No major imperial attempts were made to retake Hispania. In 448, Recula died as a pagan, leaving the crown to his son Reciar. King Rechiar. Rechiar, a Catholic Christian, succeeded his father in 448, being one of the first Catholic Christian kings among the Germanic peoples, as the first one to mint coins in his own name. Some believe the minting of the coins was a sign of Suevi autonomy, due to its use of minting in the late Empire of Declaration and Independence. Hoping to follow the successful careers of his father and grandfather, Rechiar made a series of bold political moves through his reign. The first was one of his marriage to the daughter of the Gothic king Theodoric I in 448, so improving the relationship between the two people. He also led a number of successful plundering campaigns to Vasconia, Saragossa, Leda in Hispania Terranosis, then the northeastern quarter of the peninsula, stretching from the Mediterranean to the Gulf of Biscay, which was still under Roman rule. Sometimes acting in the coalition was local Bugadai, local Hispano-Roman insurgents. In Leda, he had captured prisoners who were taken as serfs back to the Sueves land and Galicia and Lusitania. Rome was sent to be sent as an ambassador to the Sueves, obtaining some occasion, but in 455 the Sueves plundered lands in the Carthaginians, which had been previously returned to Rome. In response, the new emperor Advitus and the Visigoths sent a joint embassy, remembering that the peace established with Rome was also granted by the Goths. But Rechiar launched two new campaigns in Terranosis. In 455 and 456 returned to Galicia with large numbers of prisoners. The Emperor Avitus finally responded to Rechiar's defiance in the autumn of 456, sending the Visigoth king, Theodoric II, over to the Pyrenees and into Galicia at the head of the large army of Feudatory, which also included the Burgundian kings Gudioc and Hilperic. The Suevi mobilization and both armies met on 5 October by the river Obrigo near Astorga. Theodoric II's Goths on the right wing defeated the Suevi, while many Sueves were killed in the battle and many others were captured. Most managed to flee. King Rechiar fled wounded in the direction of the coast, pursued by the Gothic army, which entered the plundering Braga on 28 October. King Rechiar was later captured in Porto while trying to embark, and was executed in December. Theodoric continued his war on the Suevi for 3 months, but in April 459 he returned to Gaul, alarmed by the political and military movements of the new emperor Majorian and the magistrate Militium Recamur, a half-Sueve, maybe a kinsman of Rechiar, while his allies and the rest of the Goths sacked Astorga, Palencia, and other places on their way back to Pyrenees. Competing kings. When the Visigoths disposed of Rechiar, the royal bloodline of Hermeric vanished, and the conventional mechanism for Suevi leadership died with it. In 456, one Eolf took over the leadership of the Sueves. The origins behind the Eolf's ascension was not clear. Hydatus wrote that Eolf and Goth deserter, which the historian Jordanes produced, wrote that he had Warnai appointed by Theodoric govern Galicia, and that the pursuit of the Suevi into the adventure. Either way, he was killed in Porto in 457. But his rebellion, together with the armed actions of the Majorian against the Visigoths, eased the pressure of the Suevi. In 456, the same year as the executioner Rechiar, Hydatus stated that the Sueves set up Maldarus as the king. The statement suggested that Suevi was a people may have had a voice in the selection of the new ruler. The election of Maldarus would lead to the schism among the Suevi, as some followed another king named Framna, who died just a year later. Both factions then sought peace with the local Galiciae. In 458, the Goths sent an army into Hispania, which arrived in Baetica in July, thereby depriving the Sueves of the province. This field army stayed in Iberia for several years. In 460, the Maldras was killed after a reign of 4 years during which he plundered the Sueves and Romans alike in Lusitania and the south of Galicia past the valley of Douro River. Meanwhile, the Sueves in the north chose another leader, Rechimund, who plundered Galicia in 459 and 460. This same year, they captured the walled city of Lugo, which was still under the authority of a Roman official. As a response, the Goths sent their army to punish the Suevi, who dwelt in the outskirts of the city and their nearby regions, and their campaign was revealed by locals who Hydratus considered traitors. From the very moment, Lugo became an important center for the Sueves and was used by as a capital of Richemond. In the south, Frumar succeeded Maldras and his faction, but his death in 464 caused a period of initial dissent among the Sueves and permanent conflict with the native Galician population. King Rhesimund. In 464, Rhesimund, an ambassador who had been traveled from between Galicia and Gaul on several occasions, became king. Rhesimund was able to unite the factions of Suevi under his rule, and at the same time restore peace. He was also recognized, perhaps even approved of, by Theodoric, who sent him gifts and weapons along with a wife. Under the leadership of Rhesimund, the Suevi would again raid the nearby countries, plundering the lands of Lusitania and the Conventus Asturicenses, while still fighting Galicia tribes like the Onesisis, who refused to submit to Rhesimund. In 468, they managed to destroy part of the walls of Conabringa in Lusitania, which was sacked, and most abandoned by the inhabitants, fled over or were taken back to the north as slaves. The next year, they captured Lisbon, which was surrendered by its leader, Lucidio. He later became ambassador of the Suevi to the emperor. The end of the Chronicle of Hydratus is in 468. This doesn't let us know the later fate of Rhesimund. The Suevi probably remained mostly pagan until an Arian missionary named Ajax sent the Visigoth king Theodoric II, at the request of the Suebic unifier Rhesimund, converted them in 466 and established lasting Arian church which dominated the people until their conversion to Catholicism in the 560s.